Well, hello and welcome to this week's A Photographic Life. If you're a similar age to me, or if you've been involved in documentary photography for any period of time or read about it, you'll be well aware of Magnum. For me, Magnum photography has always been, I suppose in a sense, the gold standard, a stamp of approval, work and photographers that you could trust. I've been very lucky in my career to have worked with and known a number of Magnum photographers, including commissioning Leonard Freed and also Abbas on a number of occasions, documenting backstage at the Paris fashion shows. So Magnum to me has always been important, but I've noticed a few things recently which are quite concerning. But before we get started, before I talk about that, before I even put forward the idea that perhaps Magnum is on a very rocky road moving forwards, I'm going to read to you a little bit of text in case you're not aware of Magnum or some of the details. Now, the following text on Magnum's history is by Fred Richin, who's somebody I do recommend you check out. He's a very good writer on photography. Out of New York. Anyway, this piece of text, quite short, is taken from the book Magnum Photos, published in 1997. Anyway, it says this: 2 years after the apocalypse that was called the Second World War ended, Magnum Photos was founded. The world's most prestigious photographic agency was formed by 4 photographers: Robert Capa, Henri Cartier-Bresson, George Roger and David Shims Seymour, who had been very much scarred by the conflict and were motivated by a sense of relief that the world had somehow survived and the curiosity to see what was still there. They created Magnum in 1947 to reflect their independent natures as both people and photographers. The idiosyncratic mix of reporter and artist that continues to define Magnum, emphasizing not only what is seen, but also the way one sees it. These 4 formed Magnum to allow them, and the fine photographers who would follow, the ability to work outside the formulas of magazine journalism. The agency, initially based in Paris and New York and more recently adding offices in London and Tokyo, departed from conventional practice in 2 fairly radical ways. It was founded as a cooperative in which the staff, including co-founders Maria Eisner and Rita van der Wert, would support rather than direct the photographers. Copyright would be held by the authors of the imagery, not by the magazines that published the work. This meant that a photographer could decide to cover a famine somewhere, publish the pictures, for example, in Life magazine, and the agency could then sell the photographs to magazines in other countries, such as Paris Match and Picture Post, giving the photographers the means to work on projects that particularly inspired them, even without an assignment. Within 5 years of its founding, Magnum had also added to its roster talented young photographers such as Eve Arnold, Burke Lynn, Eric Hartman, Eric Lessing, Mark Ribot, Dennis Stock and Corinne Taconis. For today's younger generation of photographers, there is much less of a sense that simply reporting on an injustice is sufficient, and there is a much more complex awareness as to what is or is not possible to explain. Right now, if your pictures aren't good enough, you may be too close rather than not close enough, as Capa put it long ago. In today's information age, if the reader can be enjoined to enter the quest for meaning, then one has succeeded. With all of Magnum's prickly personalities, with all the difficulties inherent in attempting to see differently, it is a wonder for many that the agency has managed to survive almost 60 years. Very few cooperatives are noted for their longevity. Magnum, in its idiosyncrasy, its inability to stand still, has been a remarkable exception. Well, I have to completely agree there with Fred, of course, we know that. However, the basis upon which Magnum was founded has broken. The world of the photographic magazine, the weekly photographic magazine in particular, is long gone. And for the last couple of decades, anybody interested in photography will be very aware that, in essence, Magnum has kind of fallen into two particular areas. As a book publisher, constantly plundering its incredible archive to produce more and more books under, I have to say, slightly tenuous themes, but also, in addition to that, the idea of the print selling. The cheap square print sale, for example, I know was very successful initially. Again, that was under themes, but those themes seem to be weak. The work that was contributed by the photographers to support the sales didn't seem to relate to the themes in any way whatsoever. And I speak as somebody who purchased some of those prints. But over the last couple of months, and I don't keep a close eye on Magnum, but I have noticed that they have moved out of their Paris office and into a new office. I don't know the details of that, but they've also closed their London office. It's now up for sale. It's being represented by an estate agent. I say sale, it was probably a lease. As I say, I'm not going to be giving you a forensic, in-depth report, I suppose, on the state of Magnum's finances or its situation moving forward. However, I am concerned because I do feel that despite the economic platforms upon which Magnum was founded having gone, the reasoning behind why Magnum was founded post-Second World War, I think have never been more relevant, never been more important. And as we sit here at the beginning of 2026, with a world in economic, social, political, and geographical turmoil, surely what we need is a photo agency that we can trust, that we can rely upon to bring us news, photography of a standard, of a high standard that leads the way. I don't think we have that anymore. I think Magnum got confused along the way. I think it felt difficult about its past in some ways and tried to go in new directions. But in doing so, it watered down its original reason for existence. Now, as I say, these are just personal opinions. You may agree or you may disagree with me. Certainly with a lot of the major names from Magnum over the years dying over the last couple of years, there is a place there for new voices, new photographers to take it forward. We saw recently the power, the impact of the Christopher Anderson photographs in the White House. Anderson was a member of Magnum, but is no longer a member of Magnum. But that's exactly the kind of work that Magnum used to produce. So, you may know more than me, and if you do, please let me know. But in the short term, I have to say, for me, there's a red flag flying above the Magnum office. It's not one of socialism or communism. It's one of concern. It's been a while since you and I have been sitting together just talking without guests joining us on the podcast. So I thought it was a good time, also at the beginning of the year, to catch up on some of your letters, which, as always, I always enjoy receiving and reading. As I've also said previously, they're often really long. So when I do read them back to you on the podcast, they're usually an edited version. Anyway, here's one. Dear Mr. Scott, I heard the conversation on YouTube between you and Bill Shapiro on the subject of text and photography, and the introduction to the Americans by Jack Kerouac in particular. You never mentioned, however, that the original French edition did not include the Kerouac text. I thought you might also be interested in a project I did 40 years ago of a book titled New York Inside Out, with an introduction by William S. Burroughs. The book was published by Skyline, an imprint of Oxford University Press. I had to jump through hoops to find Burroughs, but when we eventually got together and he saw the work, he enthusiastically agreed. This is where the trouble began. When the text arrived, my editor at Oxford threw a fit. Every second word was misspelled. The punctuation was from outer space. He demanded I take it back for a rewrite. When it did come back, he was still not satisfied. Burroughs made too many negative remarks about the city of New York, and he wanted the book to appeal to a general public, especially the tourist market. All the offending passages and photos had to be deleted. When the book was eventually published, it lacked the true diabolical voice of Burroughs. Regards, Robert. Well, I think there is a moral for us all, isn't it? Don't sell out to the man. Here's another email that's come in. Hi Grant, use of my work makes me feel that the gatekeeper, such as the picture editor who has commissioned me, is doing a good job, but that people who never use my work are doing a bad job. This is natural, as it's hard to produce work and feel that it is terrible and to keep on creating. So, if someone agrees with you and publishes or exhibits your work, it's logical you would feel that this is justified. Gatekeepers will have to reject the majority of work, as there is so much work out there and relatively few places to exhibit publish. If someone applied for lots of exhibitions or opportunities, sometimes with entrance fees with few results, then this could lead them to feel a dislike for gatekeepers. Even successful photographers have experienced many rejections. However, no one posts this on Instagram. And that was from Dylan. And that, I think, was a response to one of the conversations that Bill and I had there around gatekeepers. As I said, I really am having to catch up on all of the emails I've received from you. Here's another one which made me laugh because, I just sit here talking into a microphone and I have no idea where you are or what you're doing when you listen. But here's a good one. Hi, Grant. I know you enjoy feedback. Well, I do. So I have to say that I just listened to your conversation with Alice Tomlinson and truly enjoyed it. It really warmed me on this cold -20-degree day in the middle of Canada. Enjoying the podcast. Thanks again, Ian. Another one comes in here from Rob. It says, very good chat you and Chris Floyd had. Made for a most enjoyable listen this afternoon as I straddled the electric heater trying to warm up my poor old soul in my constant winter battle to outwit the drafts, chills and constant fights with Mallorca's optimistically built properties. I had a bit of a snigger to hear Chris complain about the point where the better one becomes, the less opportunity there is these days to use that growing talent. Looking forward to your next episodes. Cheers. Here's another one that came in. For any photographer's truth to be recognised, much seems to rest on his ability to succeed while working with the mores of his time. Real truths about ourselves or society are recognised through the perspective of time passing, not what succeeds today under the influence of our current definition of success. Sorry if this is just another ramble. I fear I am increasingly prone to them. Even my imaging seems to have wandered into disruptive territory. Have a good holiday. In all the roles you are fulfilling, you must need a good rest. We need your stimulation, its questions and responses. I suspect 2026 needs you. That's from John, who's a regular emailer to us, and I'm not sure if 2026 needs me, but I'm going to be here anyway. Our final listener's letter this week comes from Hugh. It says this, Dear Grant, I write as a professional working photographer since 1973. And I have to confess, I've never come across your podcast until last week. Goodness sake, Hugh, what have you been doing? Anyway, I'm not sure how I achieved this feat. I think primarily through having my head down, working hard, and not keeping myself as aware as I should be of the voices around me. And there's a tale. To survive and thrive in this industry takes a way of life approach that can become all-consuming. but actually in a way one totally loves. And certainly as I get older, there's only so much attention span to go around. But Grant, I'm so happy to have found you, and your voice has already become like a friend on my office radio. For a person who has worked through photography's journey from film to digital right up to now in the commercial world, where a lot of the time our output is viewed only very briefly on a 3x4-inch screen, the changes in work practices and how photography is considered and paid for have been immense. But I love how the bar moves, rises and falls, and there are ways to navigate through it all with, I find, a blend of humility and project leadership. Plus, of course, the work has to be stunning every time. It has made my year to find you. Best wishes, as I said, Hugh. Well, lovely to have you on board, Hugh. And I think great to start the year with such a positive message. I know that AI is going to be a big conversation in the coming year, and it has been for the last couple of years, I suppose. But one of the things I really think that we all need to think about going forwards as photographers is this idea of the perfect photograph. I think that post-production is an evil mistress. It can lead us astray. We all know images have been post-produced just by looking at them most of the time. It's very tempting to use the AI elements within Photoshop or whatever post-production we use, even if it's on our phone. What, of course, we're getting is smoothed skin, perfect eye lines. We're getting hyper colours, super contrast, with the idea that these are perfect photographs. But of course, most of that can't be printed. So they're not perfect photographs when a light is coming on them from the front. All of those filters and that desire to make things, as I say once again, perfect, really that's about the backlit image. That's what it's all devised for. AI is very good at putting that kind of an image together. It's not so good at imperfections that mean something. It might be good at imperfections because it's made a mistake. But of course, that's not what we're trying to do as photographers. And increasingly, this desire to create perfect images is, to me, not only untrue to the idea of what a photograph should be, but also is leading us down a very dangerous pathway. When photographers are talking about AI replacing them, the photographers who are creating that kind of work are just encouraging that end goal. The Christopher Anderson images, which we've already spoken about earlier on in this podcast and in previous podcasts, full of imperfections, were railed against by many who believed that they weren't professional because they weren't perfected, as in altered, manipulated, made better than the real world. So, I suppose really my cry for this year, my hope for this year, this coming year, is that as photographers, we stop putting so much importance on the perfect image. I know I don't. But that's because I don't use a lot of post-production. In fact, I hardly use any, even when I'm working professionally. So, the warriors online can decry the photographer that uses natural light and gets it right in camera. But, as those Magnum photographers know and knew, that was the way forward for photography. Honesty and truth and reality, or at least as much as we can include within our images. Anyway, that's it for this week. Next week, more stuff, and actually throughout the coming year, lots of new things, lots of new conversation, lots of new ideas, and maybe even another live event. Who knows? I'm only just recovering from the last one. Anyway, over the coming weeks, you know what I'm going to do, and I hope you're going to try and do it too. And that, of course, is in 2026, we're all going to need to take care.